Have you ever noticed how the most dangerous people are rarely the loudest? They don't scream their intentions. They don't wear their malice openly. Instead, they smile, they flatter, they help, while quietly laying traps. But what if I told you that the moment you stop taking people at face value is the moment you start protecting yourself from the ones who hide behind masks? It's like a drop of ink in a glass of water. You don't see the corruption immediately, but slowly everything turns dark. Or think of poisoned honey, sweet to the taste, offered with charm, yet carrying the power to destroy once consumed. That's how subtle evil works, not through open attack, but through silent infiltration. Because while the world tells you to look for enemies in anger, the real danger often smiles in your face. And here's the truth. When you begin to see patterns instead of promises, you uncover intentions that words try to hide. When you choose awareness over blind trust, you cannot be fooled. So how do you recognize these hidden forms of evil, without paranoia, without fear, but with wisdom? Stay until the end, because the last type will change the way you see people forever. Let's get started. Number 1. The Silent Sabotur. Let's talk about one of the most dangerous, yet least obvious kinds of evil people, the Silent Saboteur. Unlike those who attack openly, these individuals wear a mask of support. They nod when you speak, smile when you succeed, and offer words that sound encouraging. But beneath the surface, their true intent is not to build you up. It's to quietly hold you back. They don't confront you directly. Instead, they delay, distract, and quietly block your progress while pretending to help. Their power lies in subtlety. Because the damage they cause is so quiet, you often don't notice it until it's too late. Here's the truth. The silent saboteur thrives on appearing harmless while undermining you in ways that are hard to prove. They won't shout at you, they won't argue openly, and they won't be caught in the act. Instead, they'll forget to send that email that mattered to your project. They'll misplace important details right before a deadline. They'll whisper doubt into the ears of others behind your back, all while standing beside you, pretending to be on your team. They want you stuck in place, doubting yourself, losing momentum, because your progress makes them uncomfortable. The Stoics understood this type of evil well. Seneca warned, "The harm of the envious is silent but deadly. Unlike open enemies, you can at least see where the blow comes from, but with silent saboteurs, the dagger is hidden, and that's what makes them so dangerous. By the time you realize their hand was behind your struggle, the damage has already been done." Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Emily, was working hard at her company, consistently producing great results. Her colleague, Sarah, always seemed supportive, always smiling, always there to help. But little by little, Emily began noticing odd patterns. Files she had completed were accidentally deleted from shared drives. Key messages she sent never reached the right people because Sarah had forgotten to forward them. When Emily's name came up for a promotion, Sarah quietly highlighted Emily's tendency to miss deadlines, a problem that had only appeared because Sarah was the one causing those delays. On the surface, Sarah looked like a loyal teammate, but beneath the mask, she was a silent saboteur. So how do you deal with someone like this? First, stop ignoring patterns. If things keep going wrong in suspicious ways, pay attention. Coincidence only goes so far. Second, document everything. Silent saboteurs thrive in the shadows, so shine light on their actions by keeping track of what's said, what's done, and when it happens. And third, do not hand them power over your energy. Their goal is to frustrate you into self-doubt, but the more calmly you stay the course, the less grip they have over your path. At the end of the day, the silent saboteur's greatest weapon is deception. They want you to believe they're your ally when they're actually holding you back. But the Stoics remind us that truth always reveals itself in time, and when it does, their quiet harm loses its power. Because while they're busy plotting in shadows, you're still walking toward the light, further than they'll ever reach. Number 2, the masked helper. Let's talk about another subtle but destructive type of person, the masked helper. On the surface, they look generous, supportive, even selfless. They step in when you need help, offer solutions when you're stuck, and position themselves as someone you can rely on. But there's always a hidden string attached. Their kindness isn't kindness at all, it's currency. Every favor they extend is really a loan, and the interest comes due later in the form of leverage, guilt, or control. Here's the truth. The masked helper gives not to empower you, but to bind you. They operate on the unspoken rule that you now owe them. They'll remind you of the time they saved you when you hesitated to follow their advice. They'll guilt you into silence because they were once there for you. Their generosity is just a carefully disguised leash, and the moment you try to pull away, they tighten it around your neck. The Stoics warned about such traps. Epictetus said, "What is given for control is not a gift, but a leash." Genuine giving frees both the giver and the receiver, but giving with strings attached corrupts the very act. It becomes a means of power, not kindness. When someone helps only to collect later, they are not serving your growth. They are investing in your dependency. Let me share a story. A man I know, let's call him Mark, was starting his small business. His neighbor, Tom, offered him help with contacts, small loans, and even introduced him to suppliers. Mark was grateful. But over time, Tom's help started showing its true price. Whenever Mark made a decision Tom didn't approve of, Tom would remind him of everything he had done for him. "You wouldn't even be here without me," Tom would say. And when Mark refused to follow Tom's manipulative suggestions, Tom would spread whispers about how ungrateful Mark was. What looked like generosity was actually control. Tom was never a helper. He was a masked manipulator. So how do you protect yourself from the masked helper? First, pay attention to motives. Real help comes freely and does not demand repayment. If someone constantly reminds you of their favors, they were never gifts in the first place. Second, set boundaries early. Accepting help is not a problem, but letting someone turn it into a chain around your neck is. Be willing to say no, even if it makes you look ungrateful. And third, learn to stand on your own feet. The less you depend on such people, the less power they have to disguise control as kindness. At the end of the day, the masked helper thrives on hidden costs. They want you to mistake their chains for care. But the Stoics remind us that true freedom is never borrowed. It's built. When you refuse to confuse manipulation for generosity, you take away their leverage. Because the strongest gift you can ever give yourself is independence. And that's the one thing no masked helper can ever take away. If you found this valuable, hit like and subscribe for more powerful insights. Number 3, the truth twister. Let's talk about one of the most cunning types of people you'll ever meet, the truth twister. Unlike open liars, They don't fabricate everything from nothing. Instead, they take what is real, bend it ever so slightly, and blend it with distortion. This way, their words carry the weight of truth while carrying the poison of manipulation. They know that people rarely question something that feels half true, and so their lies spread faster, last longer, and cut deeper. Here's the reality. A truth twister thrives on your uncertainty. If they told an obvious lie, you would dismiss it. But when they wrap deception inside fragments of truth, you start doubting yourself. You replay conversations in your head, wondering, did I really say it like that? You hesitate to defend yourself because part of their claim sounds correct. This is their power. They weaponize confusion. The Stoics saw through this tactic long ago. Marcus Aurelius cautioned, falsehood is easily hidden in half-truths. Why? Because the human mind clings to familiar details as proof, and once those details feel real, the distortions wrapped around them slip past your defenses. That is why twisted truths are far more dangerous than outright lies. They leave you questioning reality, not just the liar. Let me give you an example. A man named David once confided in a co-worker about his struggles with deadlines. Later, he discovered that same co-worker had been telling others. David admitted he can't handle pressure. Notice the twist. David's words were partially true, but the context was stripped away. It was no longer a confession of temporary difficulty. It was reshaped into a permanent weakness. This half-truth spread quickly, damaging David's reputation more than a blatant lie ever could. So how do you deal with truth twisters? First, document everything. The more clarity you keep, whether through notes, emails, or records, the less room there is for distortion. Second, confront them with calm precision. Truth twisters thrive when you overreact, but they crumble when you present facts with composure. And finally, guard your words carefully. Not everyone deserves access to your vulnerabilities. The less fuel you give them, the weaker their weapon becomes. At the end of the day, truth twisted is still a lie. But it's a lie dressed in clothes that make it look respectable. That's what makes it so dangerous. And as the Stoics remind us, the best defense against deception is clarity, within yourself and in how you engage with others. Once you learn to see through half-truths, no one can control your narrative but you. Number 4. The eternal victim. Let's talk about one of the most deceptive and draining personalities you will ever encounter, the eternal victim. This is the person who never accepts responsibility, never admits fault, and never acknowledges their role in conflict. Instead, they rewrite every story so that they are always the one wronged. Every disappointment, every mistake, every fallout. According to them, it's always someone else's fault. At first, their self-pity might look harmless, even sympathetic. But in reality, it's one of the most manipulative weapons. They use guilt as a tool to control you, to keep you walking on eggshells, and to make sure you never challenge them directly. Here's the truth. People who live in a perpetual state of victimhood are not seeking resolution. They are seeking control. By casting themselves as the wronged party, they force you into the role of rescuer or aggressor. If you question them, you're insensitive. If you set boundaries, you're cruel. If you simply disagree, you're attacking. Their shield is blame, and they wield it with precision. The problem is not that they go through hardships, everyone does, but that they twist every experience to reinforce the same narrative. I am the victim, and you are the villain. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes powerful. Seneca once said, "Blame is the shield of the weak." The Stoics understood that strength lies not in shifting blame, but in owning one's choices, no matter how small. When someone refuses to accept responsibility, they chain themselves to weakness because they can never grow from what they refuse to confront. The eternal victim isn't interested in growth because growth would require them to face uncomfortable truths about themselves. Instead, they choose the illusion of innocence over the reality of progress. Let me share a story. A woman I knew, let's call her Sarah, always played the victim in her friendships. If a friend didn't call her back, she said they were abandoning her. If she wasn't invited to something, she claimed she was excluded. Even in situations where she had clearly hurt others, she would twist the narrative until she was the one who had been wronged. Over time, her friends began to feel trapped, always apologizing, always reassuring, always defending themselves against accusations that were more emotional weapons than truths. Sarah wasn't unlucky. She wasn't misunderstood. She was deliberately using victimhood to keep people tied to her through guilt. So, how do you deal with an eternal victim? First, refuse to get pulled into their narrative. Don't accept the role of villain in their story simply because they assign it to you. Second, practice emotional detachment. You can show compassion without becoming entangled in their manipulation. And finally, protect your energy. People who live as victims thrive on your guilt. Without it, they lose their power. At the end of the day, life will always bring challenges. But the difference between wisdom and weakness is whether you face those challenges with responsibility or with blame. The eternal victim hides behind blame, but you don't have to. Instead, you can choose the Stoic path, face reality, take ownership, and grow stronger, no matter how hard the truth may be. Because in the end, self-responsibility is freedom, and freedom is something no victim can ever claim. If you've watched the video this far, don't forget to leave a comment with a thank God and give it a like if you enjoyed the content. Your support means a lot and motivates me to keep creating more interesting videos. I hope you find inspiration in them and that we continue learning together. Thank you for your support. Number 5. The charm predator. Let's talk about one of the most dangerous kinds of manipulators, the charm predator. This is the person who disarms you with charisma, earns your trust with words that feel warm and genuine, and lowers your guard with attention that seems flattering. But behind the glow of their charm lies a hidden agenda. They don't seek friendship, they seek leverage. They don't give compliments, they plant hooks, and when the right moment comes, when your trust has made you vulnerable, they strike, using the very bond they built as a weapon against you. Here's the truth. Charm is not the same as character. The charm predator knows this. They understand that people are drawn to charisma, that a smile and kind words can blur judgment, and that trust, once given, can be exploited. Their game is not about connection, it's about control. They weave flattery like a net, waiting for you to step inside, only to tighten it once you've mistaken performance for authenticity. This is where Stoic wisdom pierces through illusion. Epictetus warned, "Flattery is the disguise of manipulation." The Stoics taught that character reveals itself not in words, but in actions, consistency, and truth. The danger of the charm predator is that they mimic goodness long enough for you to hand them your trust. But real virtue cannot be faked forever. The Stoic path is to look beyond appearances, to test actions against values, and to remember that the sweetest words can still conceal the sharpest motives. Let me share a story. A man I know, let's call him David, worked with a colleague who seemed endlessly supportive. This colleague praised David's ideas, spoke highly of him in meetings, and even shared personal encouragement during difficult times. But months later, David discovered that this same colleague had been quietly using his trust to gather information, undercut his reputation with senior management, and position himself for promotions that David had earned. The flattery wasn't admiration, it was bait. David realized too late that charm had been used as camouflage for ambition, and his openness had been weaponized against him. So, how do you protect yourself from the charm predator? First, slow down trust. Don't confuse charisma with character, and don't hand someone the keys to your confidence just because they make you feel seen. Second, test their consistency. Anyone can sound sincere in the moment, but real integrity holds steady across time and circumstance. And finally, let actions be the measure. Charm may dazzle, but deeds reveal. At the end of the day, charm is a performance, but character is a reality. The Stoics remind us to look past appearances and anchor ourselves in discernment. The charm predator thrives on quick trust and blind belief, but their mask always slips in the presence of patience and reason. Protect your guard, test the substance behind the style, and remember, true virtue does not need flattery to announce itself. It is seen, steady, and unshaken. Number 6. The divider. Let's talk about one of the most destructive figures in any circle, the divider. This is the person who thrives not by building, but by breaking. They pit people against one another, not through open attacks, but through whispers, subtle suggestions, and carefully chosen words that spark distrust. They know that chaos creates opportunity, and so they stir conflict, quietly feeding on the tension while appearing innocent. To them, unity is a threat, because where there is harmony, their influence is weak. But in division, they gain power, manipulating each side while pretending to be loyal to both. Here's the truth. The divider doesn't want resolution, they want control. They aren't interested in solving conflicts, they're interested in keeping them alive. They manipulate egos, fan insecurities, and amplify misunderstandings, all while presenting themselves as a confidant to each party. What looks like advice is often poison, disguised in concern. And by the time you realize it, relationships are fractured, trust is broken, and the divider stands in the middle, feeding off the fallout. This is where Stoic wisdom cuts to the heart. Marcus Aurelius warned, "Those who sow discord seek to rule through division." The Stoics taught that harmony and reason are natural to human beings, but division is the weapon of those who cannot lead through virtue. A true leader unites. A divider conquers only by chaos. To see through them, the Stoic practice is clarity. Ask, who benefits from this conflict? If the answer always points to the same person, you've found the divider. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Sarah, worked in a small company where one colleague always seemed helpful. This colleague listened to everyone's frustrations, nodded in sympathy, and carried tales just so you're aware. At first, Sarah believed she was being protected from gossip, but soon she realized this person was telling others distorted versions of her own words, making it seem like she had spoken against them. Friendships crumbled, teams split, and tension ruled the workplace. In the end, Sarah discovered the truth. The divider had orchestrated it all, gaining influence by standing at the center of the very conflicts they had created. So how do you deal with the divider? First, don't feed them. If someone always brings you words against others, ask yourself why. Second, verify before you react. Never take someone else's account as absolute truth. Division thrives on unchecked assumptions. And finally, protect unity. Make it your principle to solve issues directly, not through the whispers of a third party. At the end of the day, division is a weapon, but only if you let it cut. The Stoics remind us that peace of mind comes from truth, not rumor. A divider cannot survive without participants willing to listen and act on their whispers. Refuse to be one of them. Guard harmony, verify truth, and choose clarity over chaos. For where unity stands strong, the divider loses all power. If you found this valuable, hit like and subscribe for more powerful insights. Number 7. The emotional manipulator. Let's talk about one of the most draining kinds of people you'll ever encounter. The emotional manipulator. They don't use force, nor do they openly demand. Instead, they make you feel as though their happiness, stability, and peace of mind depend entirely on you. Every sigh, every cold silence, every carefully dropped phrase is designed to trap you in a cycle of guilt and obligation. They thrive not by controlling your actions directly, but by controlling how you feel about those actions. And once you start believing you're responsible for their moods, you begin carrying the emotional weight that was never yours to carry. Here's the truth. Emotional manipulators turn relationships into prisons. They will praise you when you meet their unspoken needs, but punish you with distance, anger, or guilt when you don't. Their strategy is not to fight openly. It's to make you question yourself, to make you feel selfish or cruel for setting boundaries. Over time, you begin to walk on eggshells, adjusting your life not to your own values, but to their moods. And that's exactly what they want. This is where Stoic wisdom brings clarity. Epictetus warned, "He who controls your emotions controls your life." The Stoics taught that no one should have such power over us. Your emotions belong to you. They are not tools for someone else's control. A manipulator succeeds only when you surrender your inner freedom, when you start reacting instead of reasoning. The Stoic practice here is detachment, not of coldness, but of clarity. You must recognize their emotions are their responsibility, not yours. Let me share a story. A friend of mine, let's call her Jessica, was in a relationship with someone who constantly shifted moods without explanation. If she wanted time for herself, he would sulk, saying she didn't care. If she pursued her own goals, he'd accuse her of abandoning him. And when she confronted him, he always turned it back on her. "If you really loved me, you'd..." Jessica spent years trying to manage his feelings, but the more she gave, the more he demanded. Only when she stepped back and realized, "I'm not responsible for his happiness," did she begin to reclaim her freedom. So how do you handle an emotional manipulator? First, recognize the trap. When someone repeatedly makes you feel guilty for living your life, you're not being loved, you're being controlled. Second, reclaim responsibility. You are responsible for your actions, not their emotions. If they're upset, that's their burden to manage. And finally, set firm boundaries. Emotional manipulators feed on your compliance. The moment you stop reacting to their moods, their control begins to fade. At the end of the day, manipulation thrives on guilt, but guilt only has power if you accept it. The Stoics remind us that freedom begins where self-control begins. Don't let anyone convince you that their storms must become your storms. Step back, breathe, and remember, your life belongs to you, not to those who weaponize their feelings to control it. Number 8. The hidden opportunist. Let's talk about one of the most disappointing kinds of people you'll meet, the hidden opportunist. On the surface, they appear loyal, supportive, and invested in your success. They smile when you rise, cheer when you win, and act as if they're on your side. But their loyalty is not to you, it's to what they gain from you. The moment your success no longer benefits them, the moment you can't offer access, status, or resources, they vanish. And the silence they leave behind makes one truth painfully clear. Their friendship was never friendship at all. It was a transaction. These are the people who know how to disguise self-interest as loyalty. They'll flatter you when you're in power, but the moment the winds change, they'll align themselves with someone else. You'll notice it in subtle ways: their absence when you need help, their sudden excuses when your influence declines, their quickness to distance themselves when standing by you has no benefit. What they really valued was never your character, never your soul. It was only your usefulness. Seneca saw this long ago when he warned, "Friendship that is bought with advantage will be sold for the same." True friendship, according to the Stoics, is built on virtue, on the recognition of shared humanity and moral strength. But opportunists don't seek virtue. They seek leverage. They see people as ladders, each rung climbed only until the next one appears. To them, relationships are tools, not bonds. Consider the story of Michael, a businessman who built his career with a circle of friends who praised him at every dinner table. As long as his wealth flowed, so did their company. But when a sudden financial downturn hit, he noticed something chilling. Calls went unanswered, invitations disappeared, and those who once claimed loyalty began aligning themselves with new circles. What remained was not friendship, but the bitter taste of exploitation. That's the reality of the hidden opportunist. They are only there while the sun shines, never when storms arrive. So how do we protect ourselves from them? First, pay attention to consistency. True friends remain even when you have nothing to offer. Opportunists vanish the moment you lose your shine. Second, test loyalty in silence. Withdraw what benefits them and see who stays. Those are the ones worth keeping. And third, cultivate your own independence. When your happiness is not tied to the presence of such people, their leaving no longer wounds you. The Stoic path reminds us that we cannot control the hearts of others, but we can guard our own. If someone's loyalty is tied to your usefulness, it was never real to begin with. The opportunist may fool you once, but wisdom teaches you to see the pattern. In the end, let their exit be your clarity. You do not lose a friend when an opportunist leaves. You lose only an illusion. And that is no loss at all, but a gift of freedom. If you believe this video can help others, give it a like. It helps the YouTube algorithm show it to more people. And don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content coming your way. Share your thoughts in the comments. I will definitely reply.